welcome back to my channel Genesis Knowledge. So I am back with the Linux, what is Linux video. So if you have not seen the part 1 yet, I recommend you to see that video before this one. It will be the link will be given in the description box as well in the I button, which way you will get on the screen. So in the previous video, we discussed about the distributions and the open source. So I have discussed briefly about them, and again I'm saying you guys can see the part 1 before this one, but let's get on with this. So today we will be discussing the rest of the contents, the Linux shell, root, capitalization, server versus desktop, and finally why use Linux. So let's get started without any further ado. So first of all, coming to the Linux shell. So what is a shell? The shell of an operating system is the screen that you use to interact with the operating system. If you're thinking about Microsoft Windows, the Windows shell is the graphical user interface where we have the little mouse pointer which we use to go around and click on the various elements of the desktop such as folders, icons, etc. The shell is of two types. The first one is the graphical user interface or GUI. The second one is called the line user interface or LUI. The LUI basically looks like DOS prompts. So if you ever played with the Microsoft Windows DOS prompt, the line user interface is exactly that. It is that black and white screen where you type in different commands to get a particular output from the computer. Now, in Linux, since there is much more technical operating system preferred by programmers, geeks, engineers, or whatever, they prefer to use the line user interface. So when you go and install Linux, you can either have a graphical component where you can click things in the desktop much like a normal operating system, or you just have that little line user interface. The main thing that you have to remember about the shell is that the line user interface or LUI is much more powerful than the graphical user interface, which is GUI. However, when you install Linux with just a line user interface for the shell, all you are going to get is prompt. If you don't know what you need to do with the command prompts like the various shell commands for the operating system, you will be stuck. There are many cases where people install Linux with an LUI but didn't know any Linux shell commands for the LUI. So basically that's the thing with the Linux line user interface. Like you are going to have to understand the commands to get to the computer to do anything that you need it to do. Now coming to root. So Linux is the concept of root. Like in Linux, root pertains to the highest level of anything. When you hear about the root user, it is referring to the administrator of the computer. The root user is the highest level user that you can be on the computer. So if you can log in as root, you can do anything in the world you want to do with the computer. The root can also mean the root of the operating system. It is where the operating system is installed on the computer's hard drive. If you think about this in terms of the Windows operating system, C is the root, the C drive is the root of the Windows operating system because that is where it is installed. Now root can also mean the highest level that a user can get into. What does this mean? In Linux, users have home folders. The home folders holds all of the user's data such as documents, programs, settings, etc. So the root of the user would be their home directory. Now the home directory is the highest level for a particular user. The main thing to understand whenever you are talking about root in Linux is that root is the highest level of anything. There is actually a user account in Linux called root, and that user account is the absolute highest level user that you can begin the operating system in. The root can absolutely do anything. They have total access to everything in the operating system. Once we go into actually starting to type commands and making Linux do certain things, this concept of root is going to be very crucial. I have also uploaded file system difference, Windows versus Linux. There I have also explained the root and other directories like opt, bin, sbin, etc. So you guys can check that video out. File system part 2. If you have not seen those videos like part 1 and part 2, please do check out that video after watching this one. It will be given on the I button on the screen. Now coming to the next topic, which is capitalization. So let us now talk about something that just messes with every Windows user's head when making the switch to Linux, capitalization. So basically you have uppercase and lowercase letters. In the Windows operating system, it is not case sensitive. It doesn't care whether you put it in an uppercase or a lowercase letter. If you have a folder named suppose H in uppercase and OME home, 3 words in lowercase in Windows, that is going to be the same as home all in uppercase, or home all in small case, or any small case uppercase letter, it doesn't matter. Windows, except when it comes to passwords, does not care about capitalization. Of course, passwords you have to be right, exactly, uppercase, lowercase, but other than that, it is not case sensitive. But in the Linux world, keep in mind that Linux was created by computer professionals. These computer professionals coded the characters of letters, numbers, punctuations, etc. using ASCII text. In ASCII text, an uppercase H, for example, is actually a different character from a lowercase h. What this means is that in the Linux world, home in small case, home in uppercase, or anything like that would be considered different folders. Now let us say you have a folder named user, all in uppercase, but for some reason you typed in user in lowercase when you tried to access it. Linux will not be able to find that folder because the user in small case folder does not exist. Only the user which is written in uppercase with the uppercase letters does exist. So remember, capitalization matters in Linux. It is case sensitive. One of the places this can cause you big problems, and you have probably already seen this with some websites that you use, is when you are typing your username logins. In Linux, all usernames and passwords are case sensitive. So when you type in your username or password in Linux, make sure that you don't have your caps lock key turned on, or you are not accidentally holding shift when you type in your username and password. This is actually not complicated. It is just that people are used to using Windows that they totally bring the mannerisms of using Windows over to Linux, where capitalization matters greatly. Coming to the next topic, server versus desktop. Now there are generally 2 versions of Linux that everybody is going to provide. Whether you get Red Hat Linux, Ubuntu Linux, Fedora Linux, or whatever distribution that may be, they will normally have 2 versions of the distribution. One is going to be the server version, while the other is going to be the desktop version. Now the main difference between the server versions and the desktop versions of any of these Linux operating systems is that the server version is a stripped down version of Linux. Why? Because they figured that if you are going to be installing a server, you know specifically what you want installed on the server. What this means is that there will be no graphical user interface in the operating system, and a lot of tools that you use to administer Linux will not be installed automatically. They figured that if you want the tool and you are installing a server, then you know how to install the tool to the server yourself. If you are just beginning to learn Linux, you are probably better off at this point in time to download the desktop version. The desktop versions of these distributions give you the graphical user interface right off the bat. When you install the desktop version, you will immediately be able to navigate the operating system using the graphical user interface. Much like Microsoft Windows or Mac OS, you will have desktop icons, folders that you can click on, etc. But it's still going to function differently compared to Windows or Mac, so you still have to learn how to use Linux, but it's going to be an environment that you are probably going to be able to understand as soon as you boot into it. After installing the desktop version, you are going to boot straight into a graphical environment. It is already going to have management tools installed, and you can play around and figure out how to use that graphical environment. That's the main advantage of the desktop version over the server version of Linux. Now, coming to the last topic, why use Linux? Like, there is a lot of operating systems out there in the field. Why should you choose Linux? So the reason that you should learn Linux and start deploying Linux is for server functionality. Linux is incredibly rock solid. Once you install Linux and once you get through all the quirks and you set up all the configurations, a Linux server will run until the CPU overheats and dies. It would just run non-stop. A Linux server, once installed correctly, can run for 150 days continuously without having any problems. Linux is totally unlike Windows, where you have to reboot it weekly to avoid memory leaks or crashes. Linux, as long as you configure it properly, would just run and do its job day in and day out. The reason that you should look at deploying Linux is for server functionality, whether it is for apps web servers, MySQL database servers, virtualization servers, email servers, etc. When you set up a Linux server, that thing is going to be rock solid. You are not going to have the same problems that you have with Windows, where you install Windows on a computer today and works really great, but then you keep getting many updates, and 2 years from now, computers are working slower because all the updates that Microsoft has delivered actually decreased the performance of the computer itself. This is not the case with Linux. Once you install Linux, it is going to do its job with the same efficiency as when you first installed it on your computer, as long as you configure it properly, of course. Well, you have to configure it to use it. Now, Linux is a really robust and efficient operating system. At this point, it is important that you have a good foundation and understanding of where exactly Linux came from and what are some of its basic but important concepts. So hope you liked the video, and please do subscribe and like and share. So you guys can also share it to your friends so that they also know more interesting facts about Linux like this. And if I did anything wrong, please feel free to write in the comments section, because well, I am also learning, as I mentioned in the previous video as well, and I am not an expert in these stuff, so I can go wrong. So please do correct me if I have said anything wrong.